Hello, welcome to the Classic Motorcycle channel. My name's Jamie Delaney. It's my father Simon, also Delaney, not surprisingly. And we're here today to show you around our little workshop. So Alex got in touch with me on Instagram through my business account, Blighty Militaria, where I mainly deal in vintage clothing. An extension of that, something that if you follow it or if you go and have a look at it, you'll see is there's quite a lot of motorcycles. There's quite a lot about this Jeep that we restored as well, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, this is a sideline. This is more of a hobby. This is what we're really passionate about. So yeah, come and have a look around the workshop with us. We're going to start at this end. This is the Triumph Tiger 80 350 single from 1939. This was a bit of a dream motorcycle for me. Maybe a decade of wanting a pre-war sporting single, but also, in particular, the Triumph was one that always appealed to me. My uncle bought one in 1979, which he found in a hedge, and it took him 14 years to restore. It's a little bit better than this one, if we're honest. It's a beautiful bike, but it's one that's always caught my attention. Dad used to have the 3SW, which was an army bike, which is essentially the same thing with a side valve engine. And that's the bike I learned to ride on. Triumphs were built at this period with a very lightweight frame, which I rather like, and I got rather used to with the 3SW, learning to ride on it and subsequently riding it at events and out on the road. So when this came up in the VMCC magazine, just, when was that, May 2022? So I've had this about a year and a half. I rang the guy straight away and I said, look, I'd like to buy it. Can you tell me about it? And he said, it's been in the family since it was about 71 or 72, and it was his father's bike. They're really lively. You hold the throttle open and they just keep going and going in whatever gear you're in. We've also used this for events at Duxford, where we do the Battle of Britain, for instance, the Battle of Britain, the reenactment thing, which we do 2 or 3 times a year. But this is perfect for the Battle of Britain period, being 1939. It's very much the kind of motorcycle that a fighter pilot would have had, something sporty, fast, plenty of chrome. If you can see, fascinating, the chrome on the headlamp and the tank, albeit not the best, is the original 1939 chrome. The same goes for the levers, which are all original. And it's got the proper throttle. What do you call that? That's
the ratchet throttle.
Ratchet throttle, thank you.
So you can set it.
Panel tank's original, even with the original rubber trim.
Because it is the original Triumph oil pressure gauge, because Triumph, for this, they got Lucas to actually use their own Triumph logo on them, which is always a nice touch and is quite often missing from early Triumphs.
Here we have what we'd probably best call a special. That's what dear David would have called this one, I think, Dad. There's a big scene for things like desert sleds, bobbers, customs in general, and that's quite far removed from where me and Dad are, where we've always been. We like original bikes, we like restoring to factory standard, but this was nearer what those guys do. It was really interesting, totally different to anything we'd done before. So I bought this in the first lockdown in 2020, 2.5 grand on Facebook, and I bit the guy's arm off because I thought, yes, I want a 500 Triumph.
And there was a video of it running.
And there was a video of it running. It turns up, we get it out of the van, so we'll see if we can get it running then, Dad. And got it running. First thing, obviously, you always check is the oil return, and there was none. Essentially, it was one of those bikes that had been built where it had been built to look like a motorcycle rather than run like a motorcycle or be ridden like a motorcycle. And the more we took it to the bits, the more we found was wrong with it. We decided we wanted to build essentially a Tiger 100 SS, mid-60s. So what we started with was a 57 3TA frame with a Tiger 90 engine with 500 top end. As many people watching will know, you can swap the 350 for the 500 top end. So we got the paint done, we stripped the engine down and rebuilt it, and did the gearbox, electronic ignition, etc. Then the fun was with the forks, because what I didn't know at this point was that the 3TA, between I think 57 and 60 or something like that, had a different bottom yoke to all other models, Tiger 100, Tiger 90, 5TA. And I wanted this top yoke, which is the Tiger style one, because the nacelle type one, the bars go across the top of the nuts rather than being pulled back.
It's got a completely different arrangement.
Sorry, they're not nuts, but but this is the type I wanted. So I went and bought a top yoke, and it wouldn't fit because it was off of Bonneville. So then we went and bought another top yoke, and that didn't fit 'cause it turns out the bottom yoke is only comparable with the nacelle type top. So then we could fit our top yoke on, and we're going to have a proper Tiger 100 looking machine. So Dad takes the top yoke down to where he works, part-time sandblasting, gets it blasted, painted, looks lovely. I bolt it on when it comes back, put the bars on, and the bars are sitting like this, because obviously it's twisted. So then we went and got another top yoke. So 5 or 6 parts later, we finally had a front end built. I won't bore you too much with the rear on this. It's got a Tiger 90 rear end rather than the bathtub, which meant the oil tank that Dad had already refinished very nicely wouldn't fit. So I went and bought a Tiger 90 oil tank, which does fit.
So we were learning that the difference between 3TA, 5TA and the Tiger 90-100,
Yeah.
although they look, at glance, they look very similar, bar like the nacelle or whatever, but actually they're a totally redesigned bike in two very important
Some
parts.
pieces are. The other thing to note is that Turner changed things every year. Obviously, you love changing the colour scheme every year, but parts change. So something that will fit a 64 won't fit a 65, etc. So there was a lot. It was a real struggle because we were not trying to build something to factory. We were trying to find the correct part to fit, but we were working around and around different years and different models. Yeah. The only upside was it meant you could use pattern parts, like a lot of the guys that are building this stuff, doing their customs. You know, the bars are just pattern Bonneville bars, for instance. We didn't have to be too specific.
Okay, this is a 1939 Ariel. It's just a 350 model. You could also get it as with the bigger engine with the 500. I've had this since Jamie said, 1997.
98, I think, but yeah.
Thank you. Noise is off, I think they call that. And originally it was owned by a friend of my brother's, and it had just seized up, and it was all painted black. So we put a new piston in it, and just had it honed out, and just did the top end really. And a bit later, I spent an awful lot of money on the chroming and getting it painted, and I've used it for all 25 years. And it's a lovely bike with its. What's nice about it is it has the twin port head and the upswept pipes. This model could come as a single downpipe, or twin downpipes, or single upswept pipe, or like this one, the twin upswept pipes, which very much like the Tiger 80, it's very much a fighter pilot's bike, and we do use it at the RAF displays and in some film work too.
Okay, so this is a particular favourite. This is my 54 110 Triumph T110, Tiger 110. This is 1954, which is the first year, so it was the top of the range model for Triumph in 54. It's a 650. Parallel twin. This is my first big bike. We took this all the way to pieces at the beginning of 2022 because it was going to go on the Queen's Jubilee run, and dear David, who's no longer here with us, did that with us. And I spent 2 years collecting all the specific 1954 parts for this because I wanted it to be exactly right. And it is now more or less, I think, we've got the speedo out at the moment, it's more or less all the way to being correct for 54. It's something that we're quite proud of. So that's a favourite, but one that we are going to show you that we really like at the moment is this, which is the Triumph Tiger 100T Daytona. 1967. Thank you very much.
Let's just introduce Jack as well.
Yep, Jack's here working very hard. He'll be getting paid soon if he carries on like this. We'll talk about this stuff later. This is the engine out of the Austin car, which we'll get onto, which Jack's just having a bit of a go at, and we've got another engine to take to bits this afternoon if we have time. So, this is a bit of a favourite for me and Dad at the moment. I bought this, can't remember, a year or so ago. This is the 1967 Triumph Daytona T100T. Now, in 1967, Triumph made over 3,300 T100Rs for the American market, but they only made 421 of these for the UK market. Now, the reason that it's really interesting is it's similar to the Red 500 we looked at earlier, but it's also very, very different. There was a chap out in America, and he took one of those and uprated absolutely everything he could on it, and he won the Daytona race in '66. Triumph then went over there and said, here, mate, can we have a look at your bike, please, and then copy it, which they did with great success. So you can see straight away that the frame is much heavier, forks are different, the fork rake's different. It's got the Bonneville 8-inch front brake. It's also got Bonneville cams, and what's particularly interesting about the engine is the guy made it over square, which is something that the British bikes just never had. Japanese bikes did. But that's something that makes this engine very different. He also put twin carbs on, which for racing wasn't too uncommon, but this is the first time Triumph released a bike for the kind of road market, shall we say, with twin carbs, as far as I'm aware. There's a tappet cover missing there from the last run as well. It's got the 67 seat, which was refinished at RK Leighton. It's got the tank badges for that year, twin clocks like Tigers always have. Interestingly, it has nacelle bars, which seems like a really odd choice for a bike that was never going to have a nacelle on it. But actually, they're really nice to ride with. The top yoke's also different. We've got the key lock in here. And the bars sit further forward than on the earlier Tigers, where we were looking earlier with that. There's not much else to show you. The colour scheme, we had these repainted. 67, they didn't pinstripe the mudguards, which is quite an odd thing, really, because usually it's what you expect, and it almost looks wrong. We used a lot of nice stainless fittings. The number plate is the original, I believe, so I left that as it was. I'm only the third owner of this bike. So, very quickly, we've got a matchless G3L WD bike, that's Army. This one's 1943. Apparently, the Beach Group insignia was on it when they sanded the tank down, which would make it a bike that was used on D-Day. I'm not going to suggest for a moment that it was used on D-Day, but, you know, it's a fun thing. The thing with Matchless, we've never really bothered with Matchless until recently. There was 3 in here last year, and I swore we would never, ever touch another Matchless. I think the quote is something like, loved by riders, but hated in workshops. The guys who had to work on them did not like them. Everything on the Matchless is in the wrong place. If you want to take the dynamo out, on the 110 for instance, it's there. On the aerial and most singles from the pre-war period, it's really easy to get off. If you want to take it off on a Matchless, you have to take the whole primary side to pieces. If the oil pump fails on a Matchless, you have to take the entire engine to pieces. Whereas most of these bikes, you just take the cover off, change the oil pump. You can do it in 30 minutes, but with Matchless, you have to take it all to bits. The carburettor's hilarious as well, because it's so tight up. You might be able to see, Alex. It's so tight up. If you get a drip in the wrong place, you're going to be straight into your HT lead. And there was a chap, possibly in Europe, posted a picture of his G3L a few weeks ago, all burnt out in the middle.
Because the engine's so tall, it fits up into the fuel tank where the tank has actually got wells inside it to get the engine to fit in. So the first thing you do is take the fuel tank off just to get to anything, but it's very tight in there. It's a lovely engine, though.
Nice engine, nice really, bike to ride. The first British bike to have the telehydraulic forks on as well, which really set it aside from the rigid front end bikes. Another reason why the riders like them so much. Here we've got a 3TA. A lot of people will know what this is. This is the little one. This belongs to Gary. It's a really, really nice bike. We bought it with the paint done, and the nice chap in Essex said, I've just built it. Someone else did all the mechanical stuff, but I know it's all great, which it wasn't.
Very British rock and roll, we always think. You know, it's that short era where the bathtubs were really popular. The biggest problem with the bathtub is that a job taken on a similar bike without the bathtub takes half an hour, and this will take half a day because you've got to unbolt the two side panels, and it just takes forever to do anything on it. So moving on from the motorbikes, this is our military saloon. It's an Austin 10. They built this model between 1939 and 1947. Currently the engine's out because we knackered it, which is that engine there that Jack is just dismantling, yep. So we're fortunate to have a spare engine for it. So we're going to have all the machining done and build one engine out of the two and buzz it back in there. I spent 3 years restoring this, and it's been a very interesting project. Put me off doing saloon interiors for life. There's 3 versions of this. The saloon, the van, which is an incredibly rare model. There's only 6 of these in the world, of which I think only 2 are running. But there's also a military pickup version known as the Austin Utility, or the Tilly, which I spent many years restoring and now resides in Jersey, I think. So at one time we would have definitely been the only workshop that had all 3 versions in the same place. So I can actually show you the whole of the chassis because it happens to be sitting in a handy position to view it. So this is what you're looking at of the whole of the chassis and the pressed steel floor. We were going to use this as a donor one for the van before we realised we were going to build another World War II Jeep and some other military and some other motorbikes and military stuff. But you can see the construction, C-channel, and it's very strong. But it doesn't have to be a ridiculously strong because it's only a 10 horsepower car with a 1000cc 4-cylinder side valve engine in it. But it's interesting just to be able to look at the whole construction, which of course is, you can see the front of the same chassis construction exposed here.
So we've got another one of Gary's bikes here. This is his C11. We dismantled the whole thing. Well, Gary dismantled the whole thing, to be fair. And
I repainted it all.
I think Uncle Alan did.
Alan did the tank. I did all the blasting and painted it all black. Alan did the tank. What's interesting is the 39 model had a matte silver tank, which is just an unusual thing for a bike. You'd expect it all to be high gloss. It's got this lovely matte finish, which is completely original and beautifully refinished by a local friend of ours who's
one
fantastic.
side's oil and one side's petrol on this one. And interestingly, it's got a distributor. It's coil ignition bike. It's quite rare for the period. Then we've got Gary's Tiger 90. Me and Dad and dear David did this. Again, bought it off an old boy, said it was running. Same old story, top end to bits. It was a valve issue on that one. Lots and lots of other stuff. Gary then took it around the block and said, I love it. I'm going to go and buy a Tiger 90. And I said, well, I don't want another Tiger 90 in here, so you'll have to have this one. He said, all right, well, will you sell it to me? And I said, yes, but you have to do the paintwork so it's correct for the year, because that's my next job. That was 2 years ago.
So it should be tangerine and cream,
It should
which would be absolutely beautiful colours.
It's
it's a red
hi-fi. Hi-fi scarlet.
Hi-fi scarlet.
Yeah, well done. Over
and
a cream colour.
an old English white kind of colour, yeah.
So this is where it all started. Over 20 years ago now. This is a 1943 Willys MB. And Dad went all the way to Somerset to buy this. And without getting extremely repetitive about buying something and then it being wrong and taking it all to bits and doing it again, that's more or less what happened with this. But the story about this is really, really nice. If I can get in and point. Dad goes all the way to Somerset with my grandfather, who was a Normandy veteran. And Grandpa sits in this exact seat I'm sitting in now and looks down at the data plate. And the date on the data plate was his 18th birthday, 20th of October, 1943. And that's the day his call-up papers came through the post for him to join the British Army. So this actually rolled out of the factory all those thousands of miles away on the same day that he knew that he was going to go and fight in a world war. And it's really quite something. It's a very special thing and will always be with us. Okay, so something we're particularly proud of is this 1940 Bedford MW. This is a 1,500 weight British Army lorry. It's the early version that was only made briefly in 39 and into 1940 before they put a full windscreen and doors on, because all the poor boys were freezing to death in what they called a pneumonia wagon sometimes. The Jeeps got called that as well. Now this was a 5-year restoration with a couple of 6 months gaps, I should think. But we really, really worked hard on this one. It went all the way down and got built all the way back up. But the thing about it that's key is the historical accuracy. We went through every picture we could find of these lorries in France, to the point where I'd look at the canvas on the side curtain and find 3 to 9 photographs showing where the elastic sits and how deep the stitching should be. We really, really went nut and bolt on this thing. And it's a pleasure every time we do get it out. You can see the colour scheme. It's got a camouflage colour scheme, which is specific to the France campaign in 1940. This is exactly as a lorry would have looked on the retreat to Dunkirk in 1940. Due to it being an early war lorry, it is very, very rare now. Many of these were left in France, many on the beaches at Dunkirk, many in the canal, and many littered all over France. The Germans took quite a lot of these and assimilated them and used them. A lot of them actually went to Russia. Those that didn't go probably ended up somewhere like Crete or more likely Greece, where again the British Army was overrun, pushed out by the Germans, meaning there's not many left. That's one of the reasons we wanted to do this lorry, because it really is a very rare thing. So you can kind of get an idea of the shape of the front of it. It's quite a utilitarian vehicle for the period, with just a pressed grille, and the wings, the grille and the bumper all fit into the same piece. That was extremely hard to get everything to line up to fit properly, which I succeeded in doing after 2 weeks. We were in lockdown at the time, and I stood up on the front here and I grabbed this front plate in frustration and used every word that I can't use on this channel that I knew, and I really screamed at it, and then it all lined up fine. It was really, really strange. And Dad came over and he went, "Oh yeah, that's good." And then we just did it up and that was done. So yeah, Bedford MW, quite a thing. We'll go around here. There's a couple of old bicycles. The one on the front we want to get sorted is quite interesting. That's a wartime, I think maybe between 1943 and 1945 rally. And the thing that's really interesting is because it's a war bike, there's no parts on it plated. Nothing's chromed, nothing's nickel, everything's painted black. So that's quite interesting. There's a 50s Army bike in there. And then we've got Dad's part disassembled Peugeot.
It's a P107 built in 1930, so which is interesting because it's a unit construction and actually has a clutch pedal as well as a clutch lever. Pre-twist grip, although it does actually have a later twist grip on that one at the moment. So we're just pulling that to pieces and getting a few bits painted and getting to know it. But it's an interesting bike.
Okay, so this is a bike we're working on at the moment. I bought this in September because it's a 1940 bike. So it's a BEF Dunkirk period bike, the same as the car and the lorry that we were just looking at. They only made roughly 4,000 of these. The War Office suddenly wanted loads and loads of motorcycles because when war broke out, they'd only asked Norton to make a bike for the War Department because it was the best one. So they went to all the other manufacturers, including BSA, who ended up making more bikes than anybody during the war. And they also went to Matchless, and they said, "What can you do?" And they said, "We'll do the G3 WO," which essentially is the pre-war G3 350 single. Very sporty bike. And you can see its sporty lines and heritage. They added the tanks off, so we don't get that. But it's got the panel tank, 8-inch headlamp, which sits nice and low, very sporty bars. The magneto's off at the moment. That's just come back today from Peter de Kramer. I did almost drop it, which would have been hilarious. So we're going to fit that either this afternoon or tomorrow and get this back on the road. So we've been working through it. The wiring has had a few bits. The magneto, we did get it running and the magneto worked, and I had a trip round the block, and then the magneto gave up the ghost. Probably because it spent 6 months under a tarpaulin in the bloke's garden. But we are slowly working our way through what is a really nice bike. This throttle's the correct original one, which I've just sourced. The ammeter was wrong, and that's an original November 1939 correct ammeter that I happen to have in a box. It's a provident thing that happened. Fit the right dip switch because that was incorrect. The horn button's got to go off and be plated, because what you'll see is the plating is this finish that's called dull chrome, and this is at the beginning of the war what all the nuts and bolts on all WD bikes were finished with. They went to cadmium later, but dull chrome is the correct finish. The exhaust is sadly not in great condition because of probably being left under a tarpaulin in a garden. But you can see again that's the dull chrome finish. I won't show you the workshop, it's pretty basic. We've only been in here a year and a half. But what I will just show you is this, because I've mentioned David a couple of times. David sadly passed away at the beginning of the year. You can see him here. This is at a local event with myself and Dad, and that's Dad's Triumph 3T. And me, David, and Dad spent a lot of time doing that, and we won a prize for it. I think it's the only time we've won a prize for anything, isn't it, Dad?
We did, yeah. We never won a prize for anything, yeah.
It's because everything we do is rubbish.
Yeah.
But anyway, David sadly passed away, but he is the man that taught me personally so much about bikes. He started on bikes when he was 13 or 14, bearing in mind he was born in 44. So he started in the 50s and he went into racing, and his whole life was spent in the motor trade. But this toolbox he used to bring over, and I used to go and get it out of his car and heave it over, and he said to me, I got that in 1962 when I first became an apprentice, and I used to carry that to work every day. And when he passed away, the family said, is there anything you want? I said, the only thing I want is his toolbox. So we keep it here, that will always stay here. And it's got all of his Whitworth spanners in, many of which he's done special things with, bent things up, ground bits. Oops, excuse me. Like that one, for instance, he's cut a bit off there and put a bend in it. If he was still here, he'd tell you exactly why he'd done that. And he'd say, in 1968, I had and there'd be a whole story. But there we go, David's toolbox.
This is a 1943 Ford-built Jeep, known as the GPW. It sat in our friend's shed for about 15 years after it broke down. And so the condition is there's no corrosion on it, but everything was seized up. And I've had to recommission every single thing on it. And my philosophy is if you do it once and do it right, then this will be good for another 10 or 15 years. So currently, as you can see, I've stripped the wheels and the hubs and the brakes are all back down to the brake plates, which I've just had sandblasted and painted, which are these, looking lovely. So I can now rebuild it with new brakes and cylinders, put a new master cylinder on it, reconditioned, sent away the starter motor and the dynamo, the radiator. Had quite a fight with the wiring because some of it had broken up because it was a nice original wiring harness. The condition, as you can see, is very original, and our friend has owned this since the 80s. And this sort of patina is very much sought after by people looking for an original condition Jeep. I've got to send the carburettor away to get it reconditioned. Currently, I've taken the carburettor actually off my Jeep and fitted it on this just to get the engine running for test purposes. So once the brakes are back together, it should be ready to go back to him and he can get on and use it, which I believe he's going to use it as a daily drive, which would be fantastic. They're a great thing to work on, quite straightforward. Simple and easy to get to pieces, assuming everything isn't all seized up. All big pieces, really. So they're a fantastic design.
So that leads us quite nicely onto this. I think it'll be the last thing we show you in the workshop. Jeeps really are great to work on. It's a great design, really straightforward, to the point where we managed to restore this in 5 months. We did a full body-off restoration. The only way to do a Jeep properly is to take the body off, because they do rot underneath quite a lot, quite significantly. Now, without sounding like a broken record, we went to Cambridge and bought this and thought, that's a nice Jeep. We'll paint that and do a few jobs and make it better.
And then go to Normandy.
And then take it to Normandy in 6 months' time. The more we started taking it to bits, the more we found was wrong with it. Now, the very nice gent that sold it to me had been taking it to a modern garage. Now, this modern garage didn't know about old vehicles, and he ended up spending a lot of money with them. For instance, the big problem that he had was that the engine wouldn't start on the starter switch. The starter switch sits well out of the way in here. So this company, Changed the starter switch. Same problem. So then they changed the starter motor. It's now got its original starter motor fitted, but it had a reproduction when I bought it. That still didn't fix it, so they changed the battery. And that didn't fix it. So they charged him £1,700 supply and fit a wiring loom. Now, bearing in mind a wiring loom's 350 quid, and there's not that many wires on an old Jeep, they were paying him to learn on the job, as far as I'm concerned. We managed to work out eventually what the problem was. And if you look here, all it was this £25 battery cable. And what they'd done, this one's a slightly different style, but you get a style with 2 screws in. It's quite a common one to find. And if you screw them in too far, you don't get a proper contact. So the contact wasn't connecting properly, and it wouldn't start on the starter. So even though he'd spent a huge amount of money with this company, he was starting on the starting handle when I bought it from him. And it took us some real working through to get to that. Something else they did is they threw away the original radiator and fitted a reproduction. When I said, have you still got it? He said, no, they threw it in the bin. What they then did is drop the radiator in without any rubbers and without any nuts. So the only thing that was holding the radiator in, apart from this steady arm, was the top and bottom hoses. They'd also filled it with the wrong type of antifreeze. And as we were finding these problems, we said, well, Dad turned to me, actually, he goes, we're going to take the body off this and do the whole thing. Because there's no two ways about it. And I said, OK, well, we're going to Normandy. At this point, I think we were into 4 months and a bit. And we really didn't know if we were going to be able to do it. If you go on my Instagram channel, there's a few videos mainly showing the rebuild, which I think are quite good because they show you the body going on. And the thing that's great about Jeeps is they are that simple that, bearing in mind Dad had to do a lot of work on the body, once we got it back, we just sat and built it. Do you want to show what you did on the body? Because this is an original body. What a lot of people do restore Jeeps, I think they're all absolutely mental, but they take the original tub off and they scrap it because they always rot in the same places. They scrap the tub and they put a reproduction on. You can often spot the reproductions because they don't have these.
They don't have the buttons for the side,
and
for the canvas
often
side
the rise in the back is wrong. I won't show you. There's various telltales. Anyway, there's no way... There's absolutely no way that I was having a reproduction tub. And the tub on the whole wasn't that bad.
I've seen a lot worse than that. I had to put a rear floor in and front floor panels, but I still cut around as much as I could to keep the original hump here, which I could have put a whole front panel in. But that panel on the other side...
If you go around to the other side, you've got the fuel tank well and that panel you put in there, and then obviously you've got all the top hat underneath.
It is a lot more work, and I'm lucky that I had access to a fabrication shop and a mate of mine with all the tools and equipment, and I spent many, many hours. When people don't know about Jeeps, and you say, oh, do you want to sit in it? And they sit down on it, and they go, what's that? And it goes, the fuel tank. They say, what, you're sitting on the fuel tank? I'm thinking, the Germans are shooting at you. The least of your worries is the fact you're sitting on about 12 gallons of blow me into next century.
But Jack was also here, did quite a lot on this. We're very lucky that we've got a couple of friends. So here's Jack.
We were very fortunate with
Jack did a lot, yeah.
With a couple of people coming over. Jack put loads of hours and loads of weekends on this. And
this time last year.
Speeded up the process no end.
We bought a Jeep, albeit not the best Jeep, but we bought a Jeep that was very original. Yeah. And that's why we bought this one. I went to look at another one, and it was like...
It's the antithesis of this, really, with every single...
I don't even know how to describe it. Every last piece on it was reproduction. It was like a toy version of a Jeep. And it was just horrible.
This is good Philadelphia steel from the US in the 30s, which is as good as you can get. And it's great for when you weld the new metal onto the old, it just welds beautifully, you know, because it's such a high carbon content metal. It's perfect.
Yeah, so we took this to Normandy. If you watch the videos, you'll see it sitting literally right here with me talking about it. And that was a Friday. And I said, right, we've done it, but there's a big storm outside, so I can't test drive it. So I'll just have to see how I get on. So it went down on the trailer to Southampton, and the test drive was when it came off the ferry, which was pretty silly. We then spent pretty much the whole first day fixing different bits on both Jeeps, because the MB, out of nowhere, just decided it didn't want to have its water pump anymore, and that failed after, I don't know how many years. I mean, you know, we've never touched it. It's been fine. So I jumped in the van and did a 2-hour round trip to pick up a new water pump, because the handy thing is, and the reason why I was quite happy taking it to Normandy without...
Unproven, really.
Basically, is because if you go over there, they have different sellers with Jeep parts. And there's one guy who's got a whole curtain-sided lorry full of spares. So I drove up and said I need a water pump, and I needed this, and I needed that. Paid the man, took the stuff back, and at the side of the road, we did the water pump on that one. This started smoking when it came off the ferry, and gave me quite a fright, but it was actually just the handbrake hadn't been adjusted up properly.
Or had been adjusted up too much. It was grabbing the drum that captures the band round it. So
the handbrakes on the Ford are particularly... It's the Ford that's the bad handbrake, isn't it? For adjusting.
We've just had a problem with
the Willis.
Yeah.
But they do new cams now, apparently. There's quarters or 16ths or something, which I'll probably change at some point. But yeah, we did a whole week in Normandy in this, and the other one at the back that you saw. And I tell you what, there's nothing like the feeling of driving your own Jeep with your friends in it around Normandy that you've restored yourself, and you've done everything, and you're listening to it, and you're looking at the gauges, and you know what everything's doing, and you know that it's all right because you've done it yourself. And in some respects, I would have just bought a Jeep if I'd liked it and driven it in Normandy, but it would not have been the same as driving the one, that feeling of pride that you have, or it feels like such an achievement that, you know, I mean, I didn't think we were going to get it done in the time. But yeah, so there we go. I hope you've enjoyed, and check out the Instagram if you like. There's a website for old clothes. You can even buy the jacket I'm wearing, probably. Yeah, peace.